I'm going to be giving you, it's about an hour, because we planned on an hour and 45 minutes, but we started late, so I've got a lot of information to give to you. So slow me down if I talk too fast, but I kind of want to get everything to you.
Yes.
All right. Well, you're going to miss about half the presentation, so I want to try to give you everything that I possibly can in the hour and 15 minutes that we have in this 2-hour presentation. So I'm going to kind of go through fast some of the things that you already know or may already know about tortoises, and if you want me to go into that a little bit more, just please raise your hand and ask. I don't want to talk at you. I want it to be a good dialogue, but it is almost a 2-hour presentation because there's so much information about tortoises and people love them.
I do.
This pretty much, and this pretty much answers every single question about them. Yes.
It's such a cute little baby.
Oh, you're so awesome. That's great.
Step on just back and forth.
Okay.
You're designing your slide. And then there's your late point right there.
Okay. And then I can
That's
to go forward.
and that's to
Okay.
go back.
Brilliant. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so great. Can we turn off just these front ones?
There's some
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So,
wow, you're easily amused.
are you good? Oh, are you good with yours?
I'm great.
Are you sure?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, so we are saving Florida's gopher tortoises.
Yay! I love them.
Our mission is to save gopher tortoises from incidental take permitted sites throughout the state. Incidental take permits actually are permits that bury tortoises alive or harm them and don't require relocation of tortoises off of those properties. So we promote conservation and long-term species survival through educations and partnerships with governmental organizations, agencies, nonprofit, private citizens, and businesses throughout Florida. Yes?
Wait. Bury them alive? Do you get permits to bury them
Correct, and
alive?
we're going to go into that. I'll explain all of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
That's
mind blowing.
not.
It's mind blowing.
I promise I'll explain it. I know it's a little confusing. Yes?
And I got your name and where you're from, but after that it was a big boom.
Okay.
Who are you affiliated with?
Myself. It's Saving Florida's Gopher Tortoises. We're the project, and we have several partners throughout the state, and which is FWC, Humane Society of the United States, developers, governmental organizations, cities, counties, citizens, private business all over the state. So we have hundreds of partners in partnership project in order to get all this done. So basically, we're going to go through biology, ecology, habitats, forage, commensals, protections, and because there's a little confusion about the protections of gopher tortoises in the state, whether it's federal or state. And then we'll go into the project, the incidental take permits, and exactly, so we'll answer all your questions on that, okay? So the basic difference between turtle and tortoise. Everyone calls tortoises turtles, which is technically and scientifically correct, but not all turtles are tortoises. So tortoises are basically land turtles. So I always correct people when they say turtle, it's actually tortoise, but scientifically they are correct. Tortoises live on land in high, dry burrows. Turtles live in the water. They have a flatter, moister shell, and they also have webbed front feet and webbed back feet, so they can swim. Tortoises have domed dry shells, and sometimes you'll see domed dry shells with turtles too. So, but the main identifying feature with tortoises are the shovel-like front feet they have and the elephantine back feet. Their biology. Their scientific name is Gopherus polyphemus. Their ancestors are from a species that are from North America dating back to almost 60 million years ago. There's one of now 5 native tortoises in North America. There were 4 until last year when they split the desert tortoise into 2 separate species. The gopher tortoise that we have here, Gopherus polyphemus, is the only native tortoise we have in Florida. So we've got a lot of sea turtles, we've got lots of water turtles, we only have 1 tortoise. Their range is north to South Carolina and west to southeastern Louisiana, and there's pockets all throughout that area. Their lifespan is estimated to be anywhere between 80 and 100 years in the wild if they're not harassed and they've got good forage. They average about 60 years for a variety of reasons through habitat fragmentation and predation. There's been an 86-year-old documented native captive tortoise, so we at least know they lived to 86. They live in burrows and upland ecosystems that we see all over, in Florida, from deep dune ecosystems on the coast to pine flatwoods and rural areas, suburban areas, parks, you name it. They are there. And typically the density is 3 to 5 per acre. That's a really suitable habitat or suitable density for tortoises to be sustainable. Minimum viable population studies just came out recently, and basically they said tortoises over 1 per acre over the course of at least 250 acres with at least 1 per acre with a desire of a higher density of 3 per acre is sustainable over 200 years. So gopher tortoise anatomy. Got the carapace. It's made of keratin, and it hardens as the tortoises grow older. The plastron is the bottom area. It's flat for females and concave for males. Shovel-like front feet that we talked about is specifically designed to move sand. So while the turtles have web feet so they can move in water, tortoises have shovel-like front feet to push all that sand around. And this is the #1 identifying feature of a tortoise, just in case anyone gets confused and they don't know whether they have a turtle or tortoise, or someone comes to you. First thing you ask them, if you cannot see the animal, is do they have feet that look like elephants in the back? So that is the #1 feature that people can really readily identify.
Can you say the plastron again to differentiate between a male and a female?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's flat for a female,
Okay.
and it's concave for a male. That's why he came out. And the scoots, those scoots grow. A lot of people think you can count the age of a tortoise through the scoots, and those are actual forage rings. So you can have the same size tortoise, but they've had different nutrients and forage over the course of their lifetime, and you'll have a much bigger, let's say 7-year-old tortoise than over here that hasn't had the diverse type of forage that the other one has had. So the best way to actually age a tortoise, even though it's still an estimate, is through the plastron. You'll see rings on the plastron, and those are pretty much the same over the course of time, no matter what habitat or forage that the tortoises had. Now the gular scoot is that little protrusion that comes out right here, and it's bigger in males, and it's basically for them to fight and flip each other over for territory, of course, for girls. So here we go with the difference between male and female: flat plastron and concave plastron. The females are typically larger, 12 pounds, but there's been record tortoises, 20, 30, and 40 pounds females. They stay in one burrow for longer periods of time, while the males tend to range around and have multiple burrows. The females typically have a smaller home range, and the males move more often not only between burrows, but also in their actual range itself. And smaller gular and anal scoots for the females and larger ones for the males. So important unique facts about tortoises: they dig down to the water table to thermoregulate. Thermoregulate is very important for reptiles, especially tortoises, because they live so much of their time underground. Their optimal temperature is 72 degrees. That moist, cool sand really allows them to do everything that they need to do for their internal process. So whether it's healing or digestion, whatever it is, they really need to be underground and have that thermoregulatory behavior happen to have a really healthy tortoise. And it also allows them to heal very, very well. So they oftentimes, you'll see them spend a lot of time in the sun basking, and they're heating their body temperature up, and then they usually bask, then they go forage. And then after forage, they'll go down to the burrow, and then that thermoregulation helps them with digestion. So tortoises have an internal GPS homing system. So kind of cool, like our Garmin's and whatnot. You have a tortoise right here, and let's say her burrow is right here. You move her 5, 10, 100 miles away. She will march her butt right back here because she knows exactly where her home is. And so what happens with that tortoise going across 100 miles by themselves? They get killed, right? So mortality rate is insane when you relocate without the proper procedures. So a lot of people think they're doing tortoises a service by saying, oh my gosh, you're crossing a road and there's not good habitat here, I'm gonna put you in a park somewhere. Well, that's almost a death sentence for tortoises, because although the habitat's better, the forage is better, they're gonna come right back to where they are GPS to their home. Tortoises are handed. It's very cool. They have dominant sides left and right. So when we dig up their burrows, you can't see this from ground level, but when we dig their burrows, they will go left, right, spiral. I'm saying sometimes it's hard left and hard rights. 14% of the time, they don't have a dominant hand and just go straight down to the ground, which is kind of cool. Tortoises are a keystone species. Everybody know what a keystone species is? Yes, no?
No.
Very, very, very important to our ecosystems. A keystone, just like an arch. That keystone in that arch is super, super important, and it holds everything else in that arch together. The tortoise is that same thing, and that's why they name it a keystone species. Hundreds of other species really depend on whether it's be commensal species or obligate species, well, I'll explain in a minute, for their survival. So if the gopher tortoise and their burrow goes away, then we're losing hundreds of other species. So not only are we going to be diminishing those species, but they may likely go extinct as well. So the macro and micro habitats. So the macro habitats are the habitats in which the tortoises live, and the micro habitat is that burrow itself, because it's actually an ecosystem unto itself. The macro habitat are the variety of upland ecosystems that tortoises live in. And they also live in dune ecosystems, which is not an upland ecosystem, but typically this is where you're going to see them. So all the roadways that John was talking about and all the private properties, typically it's high, dry, sandy soil. So they do live in prairies, scrubby lands, flatlands, cattle pastures, horse, you name it, they live there. Due to development encroaching and overtaking their habitat, you know where you find them too: parks, people's backyards, wet, dry retention ponds. Oftentimes I'll see a turtle walk by a tortoise, you know, near retention ponds. It's super bizarre, but it's the only place that tortoises love to live. So usually all of the area that they have and they live in are two things. There's not a lot of tree canopy because they need that herbaceous ground cover to live. If there's no herbaceous ground cover, they're not like giraffes, you know, where they have huge necks and can reach up high bushes. They need that super, super nutrient dense ground cover in order to have a happy life. So the gopher tortoise burrow. The mouth of the burrow, that hole is typically the size of the tortoise. So like John said, it's very important you don't actually have to see the tortoise, because that would waste a lot of his time if he had to wait to see that tortoise come in to see how big it is. The hole is actually the size of the tortoise. The amount of sand outside the mouth is called the apron. So that's all the sand that they kick out over time. There's only one way in and one way out of a burrow. Unfortunately, I hear a lot of people say, you know, I covered up one hole, but I know they can get out the other way. So there's only one way in and one way out. And it is that same underground hole that you see. They don't tunnel like prairie dogs. They don't pop up in other locations. That one way in is their exact way out. Burrows can be straight, turn left, or right, or spiral like we had talked about due to handedness. Burrows average between 15 and 18 feet long and 6 to 8 feet deep, but we have dug burrows more than 25 feet deep and 65 feet long, so that's longer than the size of this room. So, and also that takes into account spiraling, turning left and sideways. It's not always straight in. They typically dig down 1 foot deep for every 3 feet long, but we have found several tortoises go a lot steeper than that, and they do actually 1 to 2 feet. And they do this slope, so and that plashing that they have, whether it's concave or whether it's flat, it allows them to slide right in. I don't know if you've ever walked up on a tortoise, and hopefully it's a wild tortoise and they're kind of scared of you. They'll run right back to their burrow, and as soon as they hit that mound of sand, I'm saying they're gone. They cannot be found. And that slope helps them protect against predators. Tortoises live in their burrows most of the time. It's actually 80% of the time they live underground. 80% of the time. So they want to make it nice. They have an in chamber, or what's called a terminus, and it's usually the tortoise and a half size, or 2 tortoises size. It gives them an ability to move around and relax. I don't know if you've ever seen a tortoise basking out in the sun. They kind of keep their feet back like that. That means they're super happy and relaxed, and they like to do that in their in chamber too. So they want lots of nice space in there. Their scat also provides, their scat is usually all over their in chamber, and that provides homes, breeding grounds, food for invertebrates, which in turn provide food for amphibians, which in turn provide food for all the species of the chain. The anatomy of a burrow. So this is pretty cool. So as you can see, the one way in, one way out at the top, the chamber that goes down, the in chamber right there, the scat and the invertebrates that love it. Now the reason you'll see the gopher frog or Florida mouse or wherever else the smaller type animals chamber through the side is because the bigger animals that come in can easily predate on them. So they have these smaller chambers that obviously aren't as big as a gopher tortoise burrow, and there's not a lot of space, and sometimes the snake goes in and will go right past them. They may smell it, but not be able to get into that hole, especially the larger snakes. So you'll have, if you were to, just like this, cut a burrow right in half, you'd be amazed at all the different chambers that you would see, because when we're uncovering burrows, frogs and toads are popping out of everywhere, and mice, and it's very interesting. I wish we could have some kind of CSI thing that you can put in the ground and just see what it looks like, because it's quite fascinating. Mm-hmm. So all of these commensals are actual commensals that we have rescued. These are all of our photos. And these are all animals that we have pulled out of burrows. Over 350 different species use gopher tortoise burrows, and they're called commensal species. So any animal that uses a gopher tortoise burrow is considered a commensal. Now, the many species that actually depend on tortoises for their survival, which means they're obligated to the tortoise, and they need the tortoise or they go extinct too, or they would die, is an obligate. And all these different species use a burrow for shelter, as home, for breeding, for food, you name it. Mammals such as possums, armadillos use burrows to shelter their young. We've dug many an inactive burrow because we always dig all the burrows just in case. And we have found tons, that little possum family is in one. one, we found an armadillo family in another. So, and then you've got reptiles such as all the venomous snakes that we have in Florida pretty much, except copperheads since we don't have those in this area. We'll use gopher tortoise burrows, spadefoot toads, southern toads, and then tons of insects. In addition to the awesome commensal species that we find, there's also imperiled commensal species. So these are also listed species. So in addition to the gopher tortoise being threatened, you've also got the indigo snake, which is federally threatened in this state. Then you've got the Florida mouse, pine snake, and gopher frog. Those are all also imperiled species. 2 of them are being reviewed this year, so they may be delisted. But currently they are threatened throughout the range. They're forage. So John was talking about grasses. They love grass. They can live solely in a field of bahia, but they do like diverse grasses. They can eat up to 37 different varieties of grasses. They do not like St. Augustine unless they absolutely have to eat it. But they like, so plant natives, but they eat a variety of weeds, especially herbaceous weeds, like Mexican clover that you see down here, legumes, flowers, fruits, herbaceous, any kind of herbaceous plant and ground cover they will like. Everything that we consider weeds that people usually spray are tortoise food. So please, if you have tortoises in your backyard or anywhere around, don't spray. And even if you don't spray because it's not nice.
They also like my zinnias.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll like any flowers that fall to the ground. The prickly pear cactus, they love. They'll actually eat the soft pads. So even though it sticks us and it hurts and I scream and cuss every time I go in the field and get one stuck in my shin, it's amazing that those tortoises will eat that little pad up and they will not be harmed by those little stickers inside. And they love the prickly pear flowers. Those little flowers, you can actually eat them. Don't take too many away from the gopher tortoises. But if you're in the field,
You
they
can make
actually are
jelly.
quite tasty.
You can make jelly, I think, from those
Yeah,
flowers.
absolutely. You can put them on salads. They're kind of yum. So mating and breeding. Like John mentioned, mating is going on right now. Starting in the spring, it was almost like something, I don't know, a clock went off because we were working on a project 3 weeks ago and we were not seeing any tortoises really walking around or starting to mate or anything. We dug a project and we found 3 different burrows where the males were going into the burrow after a female. So we found 3 burrows with 2 tortoises in there because he was trying to coax her out. It's time to do it. So they reached, and it's hilarious. I don't know if you've ever seen a head bob. I don't have a video on here, but when they head bob, it's hilarious. So they reach sexual maturity super late in life. This is one of the reasons that they're threatened. They're not like mammals or possums. After 6 months, they start having a ton of babies and more babies and more babies and more babies. It takes a very long time for them to sexually mature. Even though they typically mature between 10, 12, and 15 years in this area, it really depends on how healthy the tortoise is, viable mates, whether they'll actually start breeding, even if they reach sexual maturity. So you're talking about 20 years they have to be on this earth sometimes before they lay the first egg. And when they do that, they usually only have between 0 and 1 clutch a year. And out of those eggs, which are usually 6 to 8, but we've found clutches that have had 4 in them, we've had clutches that have 12, that they get predated upon by you name it. And then, when they hatch, they also get eaten because they're super tiny and small. So this little munchkin right here hatching out of the shell is one of 28 eggs that we rescued off a project 2 years ago. And during, you see right here, from March to December, that's kind of the season. So they're mating right now, breeding. Then they're going to start laying eggs in June-ish. June, July, August. Then 30 days later, our incubation rate is around 80 to 90 days in Florida. So they'll start in September-ish, all the way through November sometimes. They'll still be hatching out. So, and when they hatch out, they're that super gold, yellow, pretty, gorgeous color. Not at all like the normal color of a tortoise because it takes time and forage for that shell to harden for them to actually be, have that nice protection from predators. Coyotes can still get them, of course, but typically a raccoon will sometimes take a larger tortoises, but these little ones are in danger from pretty much everything. So not many survive until sexual maturity or farther. So hibernation. Tortoises naturally hibernate, just like bears. So they hibernate in the winter through the range for months and months and months. So they can do that because of their slow metabolism. However, the warmer weather that we have in central South Florida doesn't allow them the opportunity to stay underground for too long. So they'll have an abbreviated hibernation. So it gets kind of cold down here, it drops in the 40s and 50s, you won't see the tortoises around for a few weeks, but all of a sudden you'll be driving down the road and see a tortoise sitting up on the mound and it's 50 degrees out. So they really don't stay underground as long as they should in other parts of their range as they do